So, hello, I'm very excited to present to you today and talk a little bit about my summer spent at Mystic Seaport, the Museum of America and the Sea, located in Mystic, Connecticut, where I reside. Thank you, Ron, for the connection. I had the privilege of spending time with the senior vice president there, and it was a really nice place to wind up on the org chart because I had some insight into every facet of operation in the institution. So it was very fruitful for a student like myself. Highly recommended. I'd like to talk to you about what I learned, 5 things that I learned, as told through the lyrics of one of the greatest artists of our decade, the Black Eyed Peas. I did have some music, but I felt that it would be distracting from the core message of the presentation. So meet me halfway. So I arrive on the scene at Mystic Seaport, straight out of grad school, full of academic rocket fuel, and I have to admit I had to learn how to temper my recommendations and suggestions in a productive way. And what I mean by that is that the conversations and the critiques that we have in the classroom could be potentially received very differently when you're face to face with someone, an employee, a volunteer, a board member who's committed 20 years of their life and career to this institution. So I had to do a little bit of translation, code switching, and mentally preparing myself to go from student to employee. So that was a little bit of a transition. I'd meet them halfway, right at the borderline in terms of my suggestions. So pump it. What I love and what I bet a lot of you love about museums and cultural art orgs is that there are so many ways to learn through our hands-on interpretation, camps, concerts, exhibits. One could say that the joint is fizzling oftentimes, especially in the summer. So I had to learn how to focus my interests and my efforts to match the scope and the timeline of a practicum. I could have been involved in many, many things, too many things to accomplish in a summer. So I focused on quality rather than quantity within the tight timeline of the summer. So I was a little disappointed by the little binder that I turned in at the end of the summer, but they were really good things in that binder. So I got a feeling. Let's do it. My font was better. This downloaded different, but that's okay. So is anyone here familiar with the concept of a good idea fairy? Is that a new? Okay, so when you're working alongside creative, committed colleagues, you're bound to generate more ideas than you have time or budget for. My time at the Seaport was a place to learn from expert administration about when to let a motivated volunteer or employee run with their idea. Let's do it, let's do it. And when to tactfully deploy strategic abandonment. So that was fascinating and useful to watch, certainly. Let's get it started. Woohoo. This practicum was a place to witness firsthand the tremendous machine and financial force multiplier that is an advancement department. I've worked with a lot of institutions that have small or adjunct advancement staff, and this is a full-blown 2-building advancement staff working on a variety of things. They have not cleared the white tablecloths from the table before they're planning the next soiree for fundraising. They are licking envelopes on direct solicitation and grant applications simultaneously. It is fascinating to watch. They are running around and trying to get things started for the Seaport. They're integral to every program and every new initiative at the Seaport. They always had a seat at the table in terms of the projects we were developing or creating. And an example of that is that this Saturday, tomorrow, Mystic Seaport will open a brand new 5,000 square foot exhibit and community gathering space. This is the culmination of 10 years of planning, but more importantly, 10 years of fundraising. And that was done primarily through the advancement department. And finally, something I learned about myself. The practicum and the pace of the practicum was a place where I was able to reflect on how far I had come in my first year of graduate school. I described on the blog and to you in person that I found myself interacting with every department. And I was amazed that I was able to speak each departmental language and dialect. And I think that that's a testament to the value of the public humanities approach and how the program develops individual niche interests and expertise and expands them across sectors and subjects. And for that, I am very thankful to the Seaport and to the Center and look forward to the remaining year ahead. Thank you.
Question.
Do you have any numbers, Kara, in your head? How much did the development office, how much were they responsible for raising a year? What does their annual campaign bring in? How much did the new space cost? Do you have any idea?
Not off the top of my head, but I was privileged to look at the binders and ample spreadsheets that they have of incoming, ongoing, desired, so it was really great to see that. But no, I'd have to pull up GuideStar and give you some numbers. But yeah, happy to share that if that's something you really want to see. But offhand, no. It was 4:32 when I exited out of the presentation. So. Any other questions about Mystic Seaport, Museum of America, and the Sea? Oh, sorry. Yep. No. You don't want it on camera? You don't want it? Okay. All right.
Hello, my name is Inge Zwart. I'm a second-year student in the Public Humanities program here at Brown. Thank you all for coming out. And I'm here to tell you 5 things that I learned this summer in 5 minutes. But before that, I want to provide you a little bit of context. This summer, June, July, and August, I spent in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, working at a public history research project called Mapping Slavery. And Mapping Slavery portrays historical places that are connected to the history of slavery and slave trade and colonialism on the map of the former Dutch colonial empire. So this includes contemporary Netherlands, but also international projects like Suriname, Indonesia, and former New Netherlands, which is now New York and New Jersey. So actually I worked in Amsterdam on the topic of New Amsterdam, mainly New York City and New York State now, but used to be a 17th century colony in North America. Looking back, I learned the following lessons. 1, stay in touch. Because I stayed in touch with a group of researchers that I thought were doing great work and I met in 2013, I was able to do this internship because I reached out to them again. Because I stayed in touch with my professor at college, I was asked to contribute to a morning at his summer school this summer. Because I stayed in touch with someone who knew someone who knew someone, I was able to arrange accommodation in Amsterdam. And because of that, I also decided to stay in touch with Mapping Slavery as a volunteer. And I think not only is that a great opportunity to expand my own network, but also a great way to show support for an organization that I really appreciate the work that they're doing. Lesson number 2. Public humanities does not equal activism. I am, as many others here, interested in and very passionate about achieving social justice through public humanities initiatives. But this summer I realized that although a public humanities project might address very difficult, important, contested histories, it doesn't mean that it is enticing action. There are important steps necessary, different investments necessary to achieve action. It doesn't mean that it's not possible through public humanities, but it means that it's not there when there is just this one project. Lesson number 3, I can handle Amsterdam. And this was a great lesson for me. Until this summer, Providence was the biggest city I have ever lived in. And Amsterdam is the biggest city in the Netherlands, and it's not over 1 million inhabitants, just so you know. But I could handle this big city, vibrant city life. I loved it. I was really excited about everything that was going on, being able to get to know new communities, new places of the city, and get to know a little bit of city life in Amsterdam. Very empowering lesson for me this summer. My fourth lesson is that I learned more than 5 things at Brown. It's a great experiment to leave your country and then come back a year later to see, you know, how much you've learned, grown, changed over the period of 1 year. I can say that looking at my own perspective on life, my own English, standing up for what's right, what's wrong, simply deeper academic knowledge about certain topics, and having more arguments showed me that, yeah, I changed, I learned, I've grown in the past year. And then the last and most important lesson, perhaps, is that it's all about comfort and discomfort. I think after 9 months of unfamiliarity in Providence, I was really looking forward to finding something familiar in the Netherlands and finding comfort. And that's what I found. After 2.5 months, though, I was done with comfort. Because I realized in discomfort, in friction, I find creativity, inspiration, empowerment, drive, energy. I find that here. And so yeah, my last and final and biggest lesson is that it's about finding a balance between finding comfort for self-care and finding discomfort for self-growth. Thank you. Those were my 5 lessons in 5 minutes. If you have any questions, this is my email. Please visit the website. It's a great project.
Any questions for Inga?
Steve.
Could you say a little bit more about public humanities and scientific activism? How did
Yeah.
that play out?
Yeah, so it was actually, I mean, maybe it's an obvious thing, or maybe not, but I realized I've been a bit lazy in thinking about it and just thinking about, yeah, I want to talk about contested histories in public spaces, and, you know, that's part of the revolution, but I think that, there was one particular moment that I kind of realized that, no, that's not really true. When I was meeting with a woman who is funding projects throughout Europe that are like activist projects focused on Islamophobia and racism in Europe. And we were talking, and she was explaining the project that she had done, and then I was explaining what projects I had done, and then she wanted more. Like, she wanted to hear more. What did I achieve and what did I do? And I realized, like, okay, there's like, this is all I got for you right now. And I think at that moment I did not only realize that there are also then different funding opportunities for those sort of things, but also that there's just a difference in projects. Yeah, but I think public humanities can be such a beautiful space for kind of grounding and maybe a start. But yeah, all these different steps that have to be taken need to happen still.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi there, my name is Emily Salon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a second-year master's student in the Public Humanities program. Here are 5 things that I learned and continue to think about and consider over the course of this summer. So, unlike other folks who traveled near and far for their practicums, I stayed in Providence and worked at the RISD Museum. Although doing this, I missed out on working in a brand new place. I feel like it was the best choice for me, namely because of the project I was working on, Museum Without Walls. Briefly, Museum Without Walls is a grant project that I'm co-managing with Christina Alderman, who is the Assistant Director of Family and Teen Programs at the museum, that looks to co-create programming with other community centers in Providence. So instead of bringing fully formed programs to other community centers, like say the library, instead we'll plan to work with those sites and figure out what they want from the museum and create those programs with them. If you would like to talk to me about this work at any time, I'm happy to do that. But moving on to the 5 things I learned doing that and other things in the museum. So, first, small-ish museums are great. So I love the RISD Museum's size. It works really well, I think, for my personality and my working style. Collections-wise, it has work by world-renowned artists like Nick Cave, but it also has within its collections work by very hyper-local artists and exhibitions that focus on regional work, like the Jessie Burke photography exhibition that's up currently. Aside from the collections, because it's a small-ish institution, the staff is more collaborative than I've witnessed at other larger arts institutions. And like I said, I found I like that collaborative atmosphere where people generally know each other, work with each other, aren't siloed to their one hallway in the very depths of the museum. People are interacting with folks throughout the departments there. 2, some strategies for working with ESL youth. So as part of the grant, we created programming with BRIGHT, which stands for Brown Refugee Youth Teaching and Enrichment. It's a student group that works with refugee and recent immigrant youth. Primarily ESL, we worked with BRIGHT to come up with a tour that meshed with their camp's programming and was accessible for kids that varied in ages from 4 to, I think, 17, and had varying comfort levels with English. So we devised a tour that had multiple entry points into the material, including drawing activities, discussion, writing activities, incorporating video, and we also brought in materials so that students who were really tactile could touch and feel things. So there were multiple ways for them to engage with the artwork. So 3, a balance between looking and making and quiet reflection. So in these various tours and programs that we worked on this summer, I thought a lot about striking this balance. So art museums are definitely places for knowledge development and learning, but they can also be places for communion and inspiration. So in our various tours and programs, I thought a lot about that balance and how you strike that balance, especially given constraints like time and intended outcomes. So I don't have like, oh, you do it this way, and that's definitely the way it works, but it was something I thought about and the importance of that balance, working with youth specifically, but all folks. 4, small programs can have super specific outcomes. So I helped out a little bit with the Teen Intensive this summer, which is a 2-week program for a small group of teens to come in and explore the museum, have conversations about the museum, do art projects, do all kinds of things. So before coming to this program, the Public Humanities program, I worked at a community art center that had close to 100 youth coming in every day. So we couldn't have these super specific outcomes for each kid. It just wasn't possible. We had general outcomes or outcomes we wanted to see studios reach, or, and we had kind of informal ideas about certain students and what they needed. We couldn't get that specific. But I love getting to witness how Christina intentionally plans for and interprets the Teen Intensive so that she sets specific goals for each student and thinks through how they will reach these goals, marks when and how they do, and if they aren't reaching them, how we can help them do so or adjust the goal accordingly. So this is a big chart that listed the goals, what types of learners these kids were, how they were, what their art making practices were, So very, very specific, defined, intentional outcomes. And last, there's a world outside of Providence. I already knew that, obviously, but I let myself explore parts of New England and Canada this summer. Every summer before this, I'd been running a summer camp, so I never got to go anywhere. And I had all these plans this summer to do all these projects, get all these things done that I hadn't gotten to get done during the year. But instead, I didn't do any of them, and I traveled all over. So I learned it's okay to change your plans and embrace opportunities for unexpected experiences. So that's it.
Question,
Maybe we don't.
where are each of these places?
Okay. This is in Montreal. A bunch of these are the same place. I only took photos in like 3 places, so these are all Montreal. This is I wrote about this in the blog. This is some pastries from a bakery I went to that was run out of somebody's house in Vermont, and you just drive on their lawn and walk up and pay them $5 and get literally the most delicious pastries I've ever had in my life. So that's from that, and then this is Vermont, and this is upstate New York. Yeah.
Looks just like it.
It is. Yeah.
I have a quick question. So I happen to know that you had worked with RISD previously through coursework, and I was wondering how much that either influenced your decision or overlapped with the program that you were putting together, because I sense, or if I recall, they had similar sort of trajectory.
Yeah, it definitely overlapped. So I took Jackie Delamatre's course in last fall about informal learning, and in that class I'd done a project working with ESL adults. So that experience really informed working with Bright, but it was really nice to, even though you're in a class in the institution and Jackie works with the institution, you're not really in it, right? So it was nice to see behind the scenes and get to know everybody. I'm best friends with the guards now, and just see how it all worked to get to the place it is that I see, we see when we walk through the door as a member of their public. So, and kind of reflect on that, just that coming from just knowing it, from walking through the building to getting to know it deeper. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. So my name is Jessie Schlosser-Smith, and this summer I spent time in Arizona at the Sedona Summer Colony for Artists and Cultural Managers. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. So this is Sedona. It's just ridiculously gorgeous. So I'll talk more about that actually. So here we are. This is the high desert in Arizona. And the summer colony was a collaboration between the Sedona Arts Center and the Verde Valley School. So here you'll see the Verde Valley School. So we were hosted at this independent high school in the hills of Sedona. And this is my little dorm room. So we all stayed in the dorms. There were over 100 artists who participated. Those 100 artists and cultural managers were not all there at the same time. There were probably about 40 of us there at the same time, and people came and went throughout the course of the summer. This is a really nerdy, fun shot of one of the excursions that we went on, so we're bird watching. And so groups of artists and cultural managers would take trips out into this incredibly beautiful landscape. I did some creative work, so this is a little watercolor drawing I did. Did a lot of reading while I was there, some writing. We went on trips, so this is a visit to the really incredible museum in northern Arizona, so we got a great behind-the-scenes look at the collection there. So really an incredible experience being in Sedona with all these cultural managers and artists. So I'm going to tell you my 5 lessons in 5 minutes. Lesson number 1, Sedona. I mean, it's so gorgeous. It is so gorgeous. So these red rocks everywhere, cacti, they're just everywhere you look. This beautiful, rich dirt, red dirt everywhere. More cactus. There's just so much cactus. It's beautiful. So my second lesson is that travel is productive and valuable. So the going away, experiencing a new place, but then the coming home. So when returning home with fresh eyes. And I know that, right? Like we all know that about traveling, but experiencing it this summer reminded me of that sort of how those fresh eyes help you and how, for me, they helped me with my work. So, you know, I can't imagine a place more different than where I live in Boston. You know, the landscape is so different in Arizona. This is what I was seeing every day. And then I went back to my job at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, very different, and it made me look at things with fresh eyes, which is so valuable. Lesson number 3, the residency summer colony model is really fruitful for connecting both with people and with a specific place. So I'll show you an example. No, maybe I won't. So this is an image of some of the people that I met while I was there. I'll show you another image here. So spending time with people where we are all living together and eating together and in a new, unusual place, you make these friendships, you form these friendships that you might not, you know, for example, if I met these folks at a conference, we would have never connected in the way that we connected at the summer colony. So lesson number 4, this is for me, being physically active is really important. So I think being in an academic environment and also being in a job where a lot of the time I'm in front of a computer, I sort of came back to this idea that being physically active and really being in my body is really important. I know Emily mentioned Jackie Del Macho's class, and we talked a lot about sort of being active and also being outside in that course. And that's something that really resonated with me, especially spending so much time outside in Arizona. So I led a walking workshop, which I can talk about later. So my last lesson is that quiet reflection is a good thing. So having time in Sedona, there was space for quiet reflection, and I was so grateful for that, especially after coming off of a very busy semester and a really busy workload, both at work and with coursework. So really that quiet reflection is so valuable. So that's my 5th lesson. And I want to say just an enormous thank you to the Sedona Arts Colony for inviting me to participate. It was a huge honor to be invited. And to the Verde Valley School for hosting me so generously. Also to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum for letting me be away from my job for 3 weeks. And of course, Brown University, Public Humanities. This was an incredible opportunity to be able to be in Sedona for this experience. So I'm enormously, enormously grateful. All right.
So our next 2 presentations are via video, with Tyler's first.
Hi, my name is Tyler French. I am a second-year Public Humanities master's student. And this summer I was at Dance Exchange, an intergenerational dance company in Washington, D.C. Dance Exchange has a 40-year legacy of community-based dance-making and creative practice. I was tasked with developing an evaluation plan for their Summer Institute, which brings together movers from all across the world for a week-long intensive of sharing creative practices and this rich 40-year legacy. One of the first things that I learned working with Dance Exchange is that you need to know everyone's name in the room. Liz Lerman, the founder of the Dance Exchange, says that she dances better when others know her name. And this was really practiced by all of the artists. They would introduce themselves before each event, and then do a circle of names before the programming started, so that people got a sense of who was in the room. I tried to put this in practice and really take the time to memorize everyone's name, and one trick that I utilize to do this is to subtitle every face with the name. Developing this evaluation plan also reaffirmed the importance of evaluation not only for administrators but also for participants. I really tried to craft an evaluation that would be useful for the participants to take the time to fill out and that they would want to fill out. And I found that this was true, with participants saying afterwards that they liked the questions that I asked, that it really helped them solidify their thoughts and what they were going to be taking away for the week. And I think that we owe this to anyone who takes the time to fill out a survey, to answer any questions, that they're getting something out of it as well. I was also reminded that the final report needs to be short, that arts administrators already have so much on their plates running the programs that they're not going to read a 10 or even 5-page final report. So although I had a rich number of different sources to work with, a rich amount of feedback, I really tried to make the report short, to summarize all top-level thoughts and then provide avenues to learn more if the program administrators wanted to dig in. Evaluation can look a lot of different ways. I tried to utilize as many different methods for collecting information and feedback as possible, with a sticky note wall, group writing exercises, individual writing exercises, my own observations, and I found that the number of different modes of feedback allowed participants to provide different types of feedback, which really allowed me to write a nuanced final report. There's a poetry to evaluation. I was tasked at bringing a poetic lens to look at the dance exchange, and I tried to bring this in the writing of a final poem in which I utilized feedback and observations from throughout the week, and it really built on what the participants were telling me, their own comments, and their own experience, and I'd like to share that poem with you. I dance better when others know my name, a wealth of sounds that designate the yous, together and us. We practice more than steps. Our dance was subtle and lovely. It thawed the frozen parts of me, and this belonging allowed me to be generous. Where the lavender bends at its waist, the wind has blown that way for so long, so people say, and I am reminded of our minute movements. I am reminded of granite, how the etched letters grow too long to read. I am finding I am but a visitor here. As I am a threshold, let me practice tenderness. Take years to reach roots in unknowable depth. Our leap doesn't take us off balance. To see all of the sudden, in real time, concretely, what the possibilities are for our bounds, what it means to be unbounded. We will have arrived when we know how to partner in my rocking. Our humility will not stop us from taking on the world's wicked problems, from having so many questions, from hoping that telling the ghost stories now allow us to catch glimpses of a world free of ghosts. We are here, now. It matters where our dance goes from there.
I think we can applaud in a minute.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Vogel. I'm a second-year master's student in public humanities, and this summer I worked at the Lippitt House Museum on Hope Street in Providence. The Lippitt House has been around for about 20 years as a house museum, but they just recently started an education department in the last few months. And so I was working with the new director of education, who was a professor of mine from last year, Jackie Delamatre, who is really amazing, and I recommend that you take her class next year. And she's starting a bunch of new initiatives at the Lippitt House, and they're trying to make education at the center of what they do. And so I was working on a partnership with a local ESL program called the Rhode Island Family Literacy Initiative. And I was also working on a tour about the domestic servants who lived and worked in the house and trying to uncover their histories. I was also doing a bunch of other things in the education department because it's so small, which actually leads me to the first thing that I learned about this summer was I learned what it's like to work in a small museum. Prior to graduate school, I worked in a museum that had 70 plus paid educators and many more paid staff members. And at the Lippitt House, just to give you an idea of scale, there were 4 paid staff members and then volunteer docents. So definitely pros and cons to working in a small museum. One pro is that I got to take on a lot of responsibility, and I got to work directly with the director of the museum and the director of education and got to be involved in decision making. Some of the cons were that people get stretched a little bit thin working in a small museum with limited staff. There was usually limited funding in a small museum, and also in the case of Lippitt House, they're not able to pay their docents. So that was a big change for me. Second thing that I learned this summer is that it's really hard to start a new museum program. I'm talking about the one that Jackie was mostly working on, which was a program that was geared toward a younger audience called Lippitt Labs, which was interactive games and activities at the Lippitt House. And I was helping her to bring people to the museum for this event. I wasn't really helping with the organization of it that much, but she needed help on bringing people. And that was really hard. Their first program, which I actually wasn't there for because it was in May, they didn't have anyone there. And one idea I got from a person who runs an organization in Providence was to bring around physical tickets to different organizations around Providence. So that's my number 3. It's a strategy that worked really well, was bringing around tickets that were either discount or free. And that brought a lot of people. We actually went from 0 people to 50 at our next event, and people have continued to come since. And what's really nice is that now I know a lot of directors of organizations around Providence because I went around and gave out the tickets. And so that's an added bonus, and also that's potential partners for the Lippitt House, that we know these directors of other organizations. Number 4 is that I learned that no matter how much you prepare for a tour or for a program or a class, it's always going to go differently than you planned. And of course, I knew that prior to grad school and prior to the summer. I worked in a school and I used to give tours, but that's something I relearned this summer. I spent most of last year, besides my projects that I was engaged in the classroom and planning and theorizing. And once you're actually there in front of people, it's way different. And a lot of times it's even better than you planned, but that's something you should keep in mind in the planning process, is that it's going to go differently when you're actually delivering the program. So that's number 4. Last one, number 5, is that I did a lot of thinking this summer about the topic of decolonizing public humanities and decolonizing organizations and decolonizing museums. And I'm really glad I'm taking a class on that topic with Micah this semester. I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot more. But one thing I was really thinking about is that in order for an organization to make real changes, I think it really that effort has to be at the forefront of what they're doing and has to be their mission. And you have to have buy-in from all the staff, and all the staff have to know about what you're doing. I think if it's on the back burner, or if it's like one of the things that you do, then those real changes are not going to be made. So that's kind of one thing I'm mulling over. I'm sure my ideas will develop over the course of the semester in this class, but it's something that's on my mind a lot this summer. So that's it, 5 things in 5 minutes, and please feel free to come and talk to me or discuss any of the things that I talked about in this video, or you can email me. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't be there today. I hope you guys have a good time.
Hi everyone, how's it going? So my name is Jonathan Cortez and I'm a second year PhD in American Studies, and this is what I learned this summer in 5 points that are really just things I learned about myself. I know this wasn't the prop, but I'm sorry, Ron. So this summer the practicum I did this summer has really been in the making since my undergrad, but it wasn't until the year throughout my first year in grad school and in my classes with Professor Lubar and Professor Smolian in public humanities, I was able to sort of develop the project, the knowledge and the skills, including grant writing, which I wrote a grant for the project that I did, we ended up getting the grant from Humanities Texas, and the project was really a sort of personal archival digitization day with the museum, in collaboration with the museum in South Texas, and so these are some things that I learned about myself that I actually edited, so they're not all about me. They're kind of, some of them are useful. So the first one is, it is possible to work with people whose political affiliations and views differ from my own. And this manifested in interesting ways, especially when I was, so part of the grant was a public humanities scholar had to give a lecture. And as the public humanities scholar, on the project, I was giving a lecture, and the board president of the museum I was working for wanted to see the lecture before I gave it. And so I showed it to them, and they were weary about my sort of advocacy for ethnic studies in schools, in which she said that, quote, the museum doesn't really do that sort of stuff, end quote. And this was sort of my whole reason for coming to this museum and working with them, because this museum is really close to sort of where I grew up, and so a lot of it had to do with they're missing a lot of things, and the ways in which they can work with the community can be greater than what they're already doing. And so this is what one of the things I learned. Another thing was I have terrible anxiety and always think that no one will show up to my events, which I realized after talking to people, everyone has this. And so I, like, the entire night before, I wanted to vomit. I couldn't sleep, and so the next morning I didn't eat all day. But it worked out well. We had about 120 people come through. We had over 60 documents that were donated to the museum. So overall, it worked out well, right? And so the next thing I learned was that we can support our organizations or institutions, and this can look in many different ways. So not only with your practicum, but now I serve on the advisory board for the museum, from which I was practicum. I'm a member, which is like $20 a year. Their memberships are incredibly low. The membership fees are incredibly low. And also I still help them, since I'm on the board, I still help them edit grants, think about, we're sort of in the works of thinking about a curriculum that can go out to local high schools on local histories of Mexican Americans in South Texas, specifically this town. So I think if you went to your practicum and you really liked it, look into other ways how to help them. I mean, especially if there is such a small organization like the one I was working with, in which all of the volunteers are, all of the workers are volunteers who are retired, and so the museum is open like 2 hours a week. Like, it's just the funding and the resources are incredibly low, and so since I'm here learning all these great things from all these great people, I figure I might as well put them into play, and this is one of the ways in which I've decided to do that. Another thing is bad personal relationships can get in the way of some potentially great organizing between and across organizations. So because I'm working in such a small, throughout the program I described it as like rural museums, and so everyone knows each other. And oftentimes I was working across organizations. So I worked with the museum, we hosted the event in a local library, but we also had like the city involved in different ways, and so there are a lot of different personalities at play, and oftentimes they can get kind of messy. And oftentimes they did. And so how you sort of navigate those relationships needs to be strategic, especially when you're trying to get different things from different places, right? And this is like half of the time you're giving me, Ron. But so my fifth one is back it up, which is easily a lyric from somewhere, but Kara, where's Kara? Also serves as like a double entendre, right? Like, you're at a practicum, like you're elsewhere. Even in Providence, there's places to go like have fun and dance. But also this is thinking about like back up your data. Like, that's not a joke though. Like, I had a scare in which, so we were working with this library, and we were using their scanner, and their computer like combo set to scan pictures, or just to scan documents, right? And they were all going into a file, and I was like, oh, I'll put them on an external drive at the end. Wrong. The computers, because it's a library, they sort of shut down at a specific time automatically, and the data gets wiped. But thankfully, the main computer tech guy was there, and he was able to do some stuff and recover those data. But it was terrifying. Terrifying. So have fun, but before you have fun, back up your data. And so thank you so much for listening to me speak about what I learned this summer that were really just things I learned by myself, for which I apologize to Ron about. Sorry, of my speaking. Thank you to Public Humanities Texas, they're not here, but also my cohort for reading my often lengthy blog posts in which you all responded with a lot of help. So thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. We have a question from Mark.
Yeah, I'm curious, and I don't know if you can do it in the remaining minute, but I'm really curious to know how you went from clearly being in conflict with the board president or board chair about the content of your talk to being on the advisory board of that museum.
Yeah, so the content, I have to navigate these relationships. So the talk, I didn't listen. I ended up giving it. But my preface was my views don't reflect that of the board or of the museum, right? So I was lecturing as a public humanist from Brown, not as a person who's on the advisory board and whose visions and whatever reflect that of the board. But also I think it was after the fact that they saw the sort of potential in which my skills can bring to the table that was sort of, I think, attractive to them in a way that and it wasn't and also it wasn't just the museum board. I worked really well with the vice president and others who were on the board. So those relationships definitely helped in getting on the board. Yeah, or being asked to be on the board at least. Yeah.
Do you think you changed the museum? Do you see the changes in what we'll be doing next?
That's a good question, because after we have these 60 documents, I actually, a few weeks ago, I just wrote up the grant report for Humanities Texas. I sent them all the documents. I said, here are the 60 documents. Here's all the metadata. But at the end of the day, I'm not there to curate. So they have the documents, they have the photos, and so it's up to them to curate. But I think hopefully I've allowed them to think about different avenues of funding and collaboration in which their museum can then grow on. Because I think they were very focused on what can we do with what we have, and not thinking outside of on a state or even a regional level in which there are other museums to partner with or grants to then apply for.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Hi everyone, my name is Leah Bergen and I'm a second-year master's student in the Public Humanities program. I'm excited to share with y'all 5 things I learned this summer through my practicum with Project Archaeology. For 25 years, Project Archaeology has written and distributed standards-based archaeological-themed curriculum to classrooms across the country. Project Archaeology has also started about 40 state programs that in turn train classroom teachers to use archaeological inquiry as an interdisciplinary lens for learning. Because of my background in archaeology, I've been interested in working with Project Archaeology for a long time. This summer, I enjoyed the opportunity to learn more about how Project Archaeology functions as an organization, from its leadership structure to funding models to its strategic plan, and think more critically about these structures from the perspective of a public human. This summer, my specific project was to launch the creation of an informal educator's guide to be used by educators who teach with archaeology outside the formal school environment, in museums, on public lands, or with after-school programs. In the process of thinking through the funding streams, content creation, and project management for this multi-year initiative, I learned more about the world of informal archaeology education. Many educators around the country are using archaeology in interesting ways, and launching the guide connected me to this network. I quickly learned that the Informal Educator's Guide would require a ton of buy-in from multiple government agencies and partners. And because of the large scale of the project and the small staff size of Project Archaeology, my timeline needed to shift to realistically reflect the government's pace. While I'd worked with the federal government before this summer, I had not worked on such a large-scale project before and had not fully appreciated the inertia it requires to start something new. In addition to my practicum with Project Archaeology, this summer I also started working as an interpretive ranger at Roger Williams National Memorial. The Informal Educator's Guide project bridged these two organizations as I developed a lesson plan for the Informal Educator's Guide that would be piloted and evaluated at the memorial. The combination of these two perspectives, both bird's eye view and on the ground, as well as behind the scenes and public facing, helped me think more critically about what roles within the work of informal education I found the most challenging and the most rewarding. I was shocked by the number of times I was hailed this summer as smoky while in uniform, though I can see the resemblance. Thank you very much for your time, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions via email or if you see me in the center.
Hi everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Christina Ho. I'm a second-year public humanities student in the fifth-year program at Brown, but really 5-point fifth year because I'm entering my 6th year and last semester at Brown. And this summer I did my summer practicum at Shangri-La, which isn't a hotel. It's a Center for Islamic Arts and Cultures, and also a house museum located in Hawaii. In Hawaii, on the island of Oahu, just east of Diamond Head, which is a major tourist attraction. And this house used to belong to American heiress Doris Duke. She constructed it in 1920s with architect Miriam Wythe. And there are a lot of Islamic art, everything, like wall panels incorporated into the building, which she collected over the course of 40 years traveling back and forth. And this museum is open to the public. It was opened about 10 years ago, and most of the programming around it has to do with engaging the community in Hawaii, but also bringing people internationally to engage with the collection through the Artist in Residence program and the Scholar in Residence program. And it also offers many tours throughout the day for tourists, visitors, and people who are interested in the museum. So the first thing I learned before even getting there was to just go for it. Like interning in Hawaii at Shangri-La, people were like, why do you want to go there? It's so far away. But I learned about it 3 years ago. I was really interested by the architecture, the collection there, and also its mission statement to promote the understanding of Islamic arts and cultures. I thought that was particularly important nowadays when Islamophobia is so prevalent everywhere, I think. I've been talking about it for the past 3 years. I talked about it with Steve Lubar, and I started working at Rough Point through him, and then also talked to Marissa and Susan and a lot of people in the center who helped me get this internship. So the second thing I learned is to be forward about your interests and strengths once you're there. I have a background in visual art, so I really wanted to engage Shangri-La through my knowledge of design and combine that with what I learned in public humanities for the past year. So I was particularly interested in working on their Instagram. And this is what it looked like. These are just random screenshots of their Instagram, and also the RISD Museum just up in the corner as, a comparison. They're, beautiful pictures. You can't really go wrong with the Instagram at Shangri-La. Everything is so photogenic. So the third one from the left, you can see the theme of swatching, which is what they were doing up until I took over, and which I continue to do, where the pictures are expressed in more than just one square, and as you post, they match up at random points. So after 12 weeks of working there, I transformed the Instagram into something that looked like this, which is completely different. They give me a lot of creative room to, kind of do what I want, and this was a really great exercise for me because I got to learn a lot about the collection, which is part of what I was interested in coming there for. So I went through the archive and found a lot of different pictures that were architectural drawings, photos from the start of the construction of the house, and I also took my own pictures and kind of curated, collaged a series of squares that had meaning on their own, but also had meaning as a bigger picture, and also through the swatching technique where they would match up at random times, which was hard to do. It was kind of like a giant puzzle, but it was a really great exercise for me. And this Instagram kind of, I think, became also a metaphor for what the institution is, which is kind of a collage of, it's an Islamic art museum in Hawaii, so it's like very, it's very unique. Collage of East and West existing in the Pacific. So here are some more images of, you can see how they kind of switch every time you post something new. There's a new image as a whole. And then I also tried to keep these relevant to what was going on. So, for example, this post which was one of my first ones. It was posted on the summer solstice. So I saw this lamp. It kind of looked like the sun, and I put that on top of a picture that I took of the sky. And this was one of the more playful posts that I did, but this was kind of what started this aesthetic and guided the aesthetic throughout my 12 weeks there. So you can see another 2 posts that reflect that more literally in emojis, and there was also a museum emoji day that was posted then. Just more pictures of the progress of work. And again, like trying to incorporate both Hawaii and parts of the Islamic world art. So that one is a Persian colored glass window from the 18th century, and it has 3 flowers, and I brought in the hibiscus flower from Hawaii and tried to draw that visual parallel there. And then this one, I don't know if I can play the video. This is one of my, okay, maybe not, but, so combining the archive with my skills and photos I could find, I put Doris Duke and her dogs in this archway here. So each post was like very different, so I can't show all of them, but this was one of my favorites and also had the most feedback. And throughout the 12 weeks, their Instagram actually gained 300 followers, so I feel like I was able to engage new audiences through this Instagram. Also, I ended up designing a geotag on Snapchat too, which is kind of a side thing I did with graphic design. Sorry, so my third point, third point is that Wikipedia editathons are a potentially powerful vehicle for social change. So when I wasn't doing the Instagram, I was helping coordinate and put together, and I also participated in this Wikipedia editathon around the theme of Arab American female poets in honor of our artist in residence, Naomi Shihab Nye, who is a Palestinian American poet. She was there for a month. And it was a successful turnout. I read a lot of all these side tabs on Wikipedia that no one really ever reads unless you're planning one of these things, so I learned a lot about how to put one of these together. And then once you have everybody together and you make those edits, the impact is it could be pretty big. Siri, when you ask a question to Siri about anything, she refers to the top hits on Google, and the top hits on Google are usually Wikipedia. So if you change Wikipedia, you could really change history as people hear it. Fourth thing I learned is that there's a lot more than palm trees and beaches in Hawaii, obviously. But what I'm referring to here is just the vast amount of Hawaiian history I learned about the indigenous population there, indigenous rights, people who are calling for sovereignty. I went to a few poetry slams about this, and just the impact of military presence and also the dependency of the people on the island on military economically. Like a lot of businesses are dependent on them. And my fifth point, which I learned from Naomi Shihab-Nye after talking to her throughout the month, was to live your life with yutori, which is in Japanese life spaciousness. She said she learned this from one of her Japanese students who said, living with spaciousness in your life is like leaving a little bit earlier, so that when you get to the place, you have time to sit there and look around. It's like reading a book, not for class, for your own enjoyment. You don't have to write a response or paraphrase it or whatever. So for me, it was the summer getting up or leaving an hour and a half earlier than work so I could bike to work 40 minutes uphill up Diamond Head Road, which is like really large hill. So, and then I'll leave with this last photo, which I'm kind of ratting myself out here, but this could also mean having your staff meetings in the boat basin, which another interpretation of yutori, but wasn't my idea, but there are many ways you can apply it to your life. So I'm sorry I went so long over time, but I have questions?
So a lot of the work that you did on Instagram, I'm wondering how are they looking to keep up with that? Like with the sort of work that you've already done to make their Instagram. I follow it because you had a practicum there and it's great. But I'm wondering if you helped someone else learn how to do it, or like how is that working, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I gave some quick Photoshop tutorials towards the end, but I think what they're going to try to do is phase out of that, and the Instagram is kind of like a platform for, I don't know what they're going to do next. They might just they're keeping with the aesthetic right now, but I know they changed their the little info section. They switched what the Instagram was about. I don't have it here to quote, but there are changes happening, but I've also noticed they've been posting slowly, so it's kind of to be decided. I'm not really sure where it's going, but I think it's a really fruitful platform for engaging audiences.
How do you decide to work through Instagram? How was that, I don't know, at the end? How do you decide to mix your visual arts background with these public humanities and the museum? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Why I started?
No. Why Instagram?
Why Instagram?
Yeah.
Well, their Instagram was beautiful, as you saw, but I thought that, there's so much you can do with Instagram, and there are a lot of, I think a generally younger audience uses Instagram too, so just in terms of
my question was how was it, how did you came with the museum to decide that you will working in Instagram?
Oh, I let them know what my second point strengths and interests were, and I worked it out, and they let me take over their Instagram. Yeah.
Because I see that there is such a beautiful working visually, but it looks very complex, and that you try to show that not just like these touristic places, like more like a visual experience. So yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrea. I'm a second year also in the Public Humanities program, and I'll share with you the 5 things I learned in 5-ish squishy minutes. So to get started, I spent my practicum at the Tenement Museum in New York. As working as the Research and Exhibit Development Fellow in the Curatorial Department, I helped develop material for 103 Orchard Street. This is the museum's newest exhibition. It will tell the story of 3 immigrant families, much like 97 Orchard Street, but in this case, it is a Holocaust survivor family, a Puerto Rican migrant family, and a Chinese immigrant family. And in addition to this, the space will also share the story of Chinatown's garment industry and later labor movements, and it will open next summer. So get your tickets. The first lesson, there's more to local history than research. My primary project for this practicum involved editing and rewriting the museum's sourcebook for 103. And what that is, it's an internal resource that compiles all the research conducted on the property, the residents, and the surrounding community. So at this stage in the project, it's really useful for the curators as they're writing and revising the exhibit scripts, and later it will be distributed to the educators for tour content. And what I really thought was going to be a pretty fun, if not quick and dry, research project quickly revealed all the sort of work that can go into crafting a local history. So the Tenement Museum is rooted in New York's Lower East Side, and that's basically made their life kind of fun. For 103, it was inhabited up until the museum bought the building. So one of the things they had to manage was relocating all the residents to apartments. A lot of these folks had rent-controlled apartments, and they expected homes that were, at a cost equal to or less than what they had. So the museum had to negotiate those costs. In other cases, it's just the simple fact of a big museum coming and talking to folks who, one, not only just lost their home, but also folks who would later be solicited to participate in the exhibition later. So I got to see how it has unfolded, how it will unfold, and ultimately impact the overall curatorial plan. So that was definitely a good lesson to learn. The second one, as you saw and has been reiterated, is just to get it for the summer. And by that, I mean just take advantage. We have 10 weeks for the summer. It sounds like a lot of time, but once you get down to it, it's not a lot of time at all. So you want to be productive, but you also just want to enjoy it at the same time. I had to remind myself of this every day in the office, but I'm really glad I did. It made for a better practicum and just for a better summer. The third is that digital projects do exist in real life. In addition to the source book, I worked on the Tenement Museum's various digital initiatives. Some of it was just content management on their servers. Others involved Your Story, Our Story, which I think just launched officially this past summer before I left. And what it is, it's an online crowdsourced digital archive that collects users' objects and their stories to the immigrant experience. It was launched first as an educational program with New York schools, and they're building it out slowly to be a little bit more inclusive, not only to visitors in the museum, but they're hoping to get a more national and even international perspective. But really what this all did was further refine my understanding of the digital public humanities. With this sort of work, it's easy to get caught behind a computer all day, and it's nice to just get a different perspective on how these things come together. We had this really great moment with our interactive designers in a meeting, and we're thinking about like the user interface for the interactive experience in 103, until we all sort of stopped and realized that we were sitting in the same room, that a mirror copy of the room that would house that interactive experience. So instead of continuing to work on our Google Doc, we all just sort of stopped and moved furniture around and moved through the place as visitors and tour guides would. So that was really fun. The fourth lesson, center voices of color. This is something I knew and definitely appreciated before coming into the museum, but my experiences with this practicum only underscored that fact. So I thought it was still worth mentioning today. 103 Orchard marks the first time that the museum is going to tell the story of people of color, and will push the narrative of the Tenement Museum past, white ethnic immigrant communities of the 19th century and early 20th century. It was really important and exciting work, and I'm really happy to have been a part of it. But increasingly towards the summer, it was clear that telling a more diverse history and committing yourself to that is one thing, and being a more diverse museum is another. And sort of that journey forces a museum to reevaluate its own identity, its branding, its management practices. And this lesson isn't obviously reserved to the Tenement Museum. It's part of a larger, more complicated conversation on representation, but I'm glad I got to cut my teeth in it this summer. And the last and final lesson is to just talk to strangers, as weird as that is. I lived in Bushwick for the summer and found my home through Airbnb, so that was sort of like showing up on a doorstep and like, hey, I'm gonna live with you for 10 weeks. It was great, but also in a productive manner. We talked a lot about networking last year in methods, and I took that to heart. luckily, everyone who I emailed responded to my email, so I got to talk and have coffee with a bunch of folks throughout the city. I had every Friday off, so that made it pretty easy. But yeah, I just learned what people do, both like in the museum world. I met with folks in the Brooklyn Museum and at the Met, and some of the folks outside of it, so in tech companies or design and media consultancies, all basically places I would see myself at for graduation. And just at the end of the day, I got to have a lot of coffee with interesting people and spend a lot of money. That's fine. So thank you to everyone for coming. Thanks for NYC for a great summer. These are some pictures. I refrain from any puppy or excessive photos of food, but I will be willing to share those with you for anyone interested. So, yeah. Questions? Yep.
After public humanities, like, would you consider working in a place like the Tenement Museum, and how would you want your role to have changed from a practicum to now, like, if you were to work there?
Yes, I would. Straight up told them that. They're like, hey, come see me in May. I will follow up with you. I think, so the Your Story, Our Story stuff, I would like to see myself there, because I think they're doing a really cool thing where it is really linked with their educational department, which I don't really have a lot of experience of. That was the first time I saw it, but I really appreciated. So just thinking about like digital strategies for them and how it impacts their tours, since their tours really have to be flexible since they're so limited on space. I think I would just see myself around there. Yeah. Yes, Steve.
What did you think of Hamilton?
Oh my God. I went by myself and it was great. I made friends with everyone in the row and we were all like, hey, do you remember that one song after the show? And it was great. So yeah, I highly recommend. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So I worked with the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation in Performing Arts. I worked, my practicum supervisor was Susan Fetter, who's the program officer in Performing Arts, and she's been there for 8 years now. So my core projects were, I co-authored 5 internal reports and memos for Arts and Cultural Heritage. I interviewed and created a story bank with a group of potential grantees. I assisted with 2 convenings. They're working with conservation centers, I don't have the right words, but conservation centers, and an artist well-being convening. I read several white papers that they gave me as homework for the weekends, and I shadowed various program officers. I read many, many grants, and I sat in on conference calls, meetings, and parties. So my lesson 1 was funding networked approaches. So I learned very quickly that in arts and cultural heritage at the foundation, they're very interested in cohort models. They're very interested in collaborative frameworks of working across different cultural institutions for the betterment of the field and for the health of that particular field, which really inspired me as someone who works within cultural institutions to think about how we are earnest and reaching across the table and thinking less so about scarcity. So yes, cohort models, the Arts and Cultural Heritage department drew a lot of inspiration from MMUF, which is Mellon May's undergraduate fellowship. And it is a fellowship that basically for the last 30 years, 40 years maybe, has not that long, maybe 30 years, has tracked young scholars of color through academic careers. And so they're really interested in that model and what that means for cultural workers of color and pipelines. Service organizations are important, especially if you're a large foundation that doesn't have the capacity as much to give a lot of smaller grants. Yes, and that all of these kind of networked approaches are in service of more larger impact in a single field, which is its own sort of policy implication. So this is kind of like 1.2, but I was struggling, so alliances matter. So the Mellon Foundation is always interested in working with other foundations and trying to think about how they can work together to redress systemic issues. And more money, less problems, maybe? I don't know. But the thought of collaborating to a single end is something that continually came up. The data always tells a story. This is a complicated lesson, to be honest. Data can tell a lot of stories, and sometimes they're more truthful than others. I really wrestled with that. Like, when I was writing my first report, I was just like, but is this true? Like, the data, like, is it really reflecting the anecdotal knowledge that I have, the stories that I've heard from the field? And I think that over time, doing more reports, I realized, like, yeah, there is actually something very deeply rich about numbers and what they can communicate. So I had to cull the data. That was like working with the library and the research center there, and then meditating on the data, and then comparing the data to white papers, lots of white papers, and then letting the holes in the data become a basket. That was the analogy I thought about. What is the kind of the gaps in the knowledge that we know, and how does that become a potential for new points of research, but also a potential for new funding opportunities, and how do you communicate that in a report? Grant making language. The language is difficult. It's frustrating. And it really wasn't actually until the end of my practicum that I really was able to piece together that the language of the grant, or the language that the foundation required, was part and parcel with the expectations of the legal department and the investors, and that the program staff is absolutely beholden to being able to communicate the value of these grants and these programs to those departments. So while I naively thought of all funders as just wanting really strict, unnecessarily high language, there actually is that struggle within the Arts and Cultural Heritage Department to figure out how to communicate the value of the arts and the humanities to non-arts and humanities people. So it doesn't end, people. So lesson 5, they throw amazing parties. That was pretty crazy. They have turtles. I missed that point. They have a garden with turtles, and you can go and look at the turtles every day. I would watch them at lunch. They're baby turtles. Baby showers and going away parties, and all of the staff is deeply involved. High-level staff have opinions about the tablecloth patterns. Everybody gets in on the business. Those are my 5.
Questions? Susan?
I was interested, Ariel, and I read the blogs, and so I know some of what you think, but I really always thought of you as an artist who then goes into a foundation. And so that mix struck me as interesting, and I wondered if you had anything to say about that.
Yeah.
I mean, not to ask you to do a performance piece about the Mellon Foundation, but I think it would be great.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, I imagine, like, if I didn't, what would that mean? I think there were two takeaways from that, being someone who's a practicing artist working in the foundation. I, number one, realized how difficult it is to want to do this work and live in New York City and try and be a practicing artist. I was like, it's not within my capacity to live like that. So that was lesson
All three
one.
things.
All three
Three
things.
things is too much.
Yeah, and then I wasn't able to like figure that out. But I think what else I learned was that I kind of had to kind of check everything that I presumed about the politics of people who work in foundations. I had to really check that quickly. But there are a lot of folks who work in foundations who have quite radical politics or are within themselves frustrated with the machine of the foundation themselves. And so to kind of check that and come at the door and assume best intentions and assume that we are all trying to move forward and affect change in our respective ways, respecting a multiplicity of tactics.
Could you expand on your holes in data as basket metaphor?
Yeah, I haven't quite finished it in my head, but I think that when for a particular research project, they were looking at funding a new cohort, and a lot of my research was around arts and cultural initiatives for institutions of color and cultural leaders of color. And so there were some programs that I think the senior program officer expected me and the program associate I was working with to find in our research of the field that we did not find. We had to stop and be like, okay, this is the opportunity to think about what are the systemic issues that make this, that indicate why these institutions don't exist or why this program hasn't been put into place yet. That's kind of more of what it is, that there's opportunities in those, in the holes of those research moments to be able to create new things.
Thank you.
So my name is Maggie Goddard, and I am a second-year PhD student in American Studies, and this is my summer practicum. So first, support an organization that excites you, I think is a really key point to this. While it is an exciting opportunity for you, we also are recognizing that often you're providing your free labor to this institution and you are supporting them. You are giving them value. Your volunteer hours will go on a grant, so you are supporting them. So I think it's really important to think about the kind of organization that you want to lend that support to. And so I actually worked at 2 institutions in my hometown of Cleveland, both of which I'm really excited about still. So I worked at Cleveland Print Room, which is a community darkroom and workspace that also offers educational programming and it organizes photography exhibitions. And then also MoCA Cleveland, which is a non-collecting institution, and it's the only contemporary art museum in Northeast Ohio. Have a deliverable is key. We were told as we were planning our practicum to have a deliverable, and I feel like everyone's demonstrated that they have something that they can say they did, which is really important. So my deliverables were at MoCA, I developed a museum engagement resource guide, which was a compilation of relevant case studies, theory, people that they can contact to help train the staff, and facilitating encounters with the new. This is one of the institutional goals of MoCA, which is a very unusual way of representing what the kind of work that they want to do, but their dream is to have anyone in the building be able to give a tour of someone who's visiting, and that's really tricky in a non-collecting institution that doesn't have a permanent collection. So it was a really interesting project for me coming out of my intro to public humanities and methods in public humanities classes, thinking about how I can facilitate that. And then at the Cleveland Print Room, I created curriculum for a pilot youth mastery program in photography for middle and high school students with this $200,000 grant from the Cleveland Foundation. And then present tense, I'm curating an exhibition which opens January 20th on mental illness and outsider art in the United States based on a collection of magic lantern slides. And I can talk about that more, but I'm gonna keep going. So my third point is to proactively prioritize you. And what I mean by that is you're designing your practicum with yourself in mind, recognizing the skills that you want to build on. And one of my dreams is to manage a gallery space, and so I acquired the skills to learn how to do that through this practicum. I also think that you should articulate whether or not you want time to do your own research or creative practice and build that into the schedule. They'll probably be very excited to have you, and so I think it's a good idea to articulate your needs. I think Christina said it really well also. But yeah, not being scared to say what you want out of a project and be direct about your strengths as well. Fourth, be humble, be curious, and be honest. I think it's really important to show your support for your coworkers in small and big ways. Small tasks can have a really large impact, whether that's something that people don't notice, but also asking people if they need help. And that afforded me really interesting opportunities. I was in communication with the director of educational programming and public programs and asked if she needed help, and ended up Skyping with Mark Mothersbaugh, which was super cool, and like making a stop motion film with people who were visiting the museum. I took photos for this Dada Punk Cabaret party. So it was actually really exciting opportunities that then channel in by extending your help to other people. And also committing yourself to the outside community. I'm from Cleveland, so I was really excited to go back to my hometown to watch the world champion Cleveland Cavaliers. Thanks, Susan. And I think it's really important to embed yourself within the community. And that takes a really wide range. We've talked a lot about what is a public. I think it takes a lot of different forms. And I learned a lot about the arts community in Cleveland that I did not know about. I was at 25th and Superior at the Cleveland Print Room and at MoCA's and University Circle, and I learned a lot more about those areas and the ways that arts organizations are developing there. Finally, you got this, to reiterate what Andrea said. You will design an amazing practicum. I think having confidence in that is really key. Also having confidence in your own experience. I was asked if I have experience writing grants, and I said, yes, I do. And so I did. And also if you feel like if Google doesn't work, you can ask other people. I was developing a CSV file, which I had experience doing thanks to Andrea's knowledge in Bob's class, and so I was like, I'll develop a CSV file, and looked really smart. But then when I had questions, I could always turn to Andrea. So knowing that you have a community of support, I think is so crucial. And I feel like we really had our practicum to support us. So, any questions? That was $4.59, by the way. Cheese. Yeah.
So are you thinking of returning to Cleveland, and working at these institutions make you feel like those would be good options?
Yeah, it made me really excited about it. I mean, I'm going to continue with the PhD program, and then who knows with academia, but yeah. But I want to continue having a relationship with Cleveland, and working with the Cleveland Print Room has really been exciting. I'm excited to go back for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we'll continue to have a relationship with MoCA as well. Yeah. I saw Jim. What do you want to say, Jim?
Two-part question. Part one, did you meet LeBron James? And part two, would you publicly apologize for all the evil that the Cleveland Cavaliers have done?
It's a two-part question.
I'm going to disregard the second part, but yes, I saw LeBron James at the parade. We had a parade because I don't know if you know, but we're the world champions. Basketball.
I don't recognize that.
We'll discuss it over cheese. Cool.
Any other questions? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. This is fantastic as usual. You all did a great job. This is one of our favorite days of the year, I think, here at the center, is hearing all about what you did over your summer vacation. So it's sort of like a throwback in a way. Susan, any last words?
Yeah, I'm Susan Smyan. I'm director of the Center for Public Humanities, and what we're going to do now is, with your help, we're going to push the chairs to the side. We're going to bring in some cheese and wine and cheese, and I hope that students who are here will introduce themselves to people they haven't met before. We've invited the fellows, the faculty fellows, the community fellows, and our community partners, and they're going to start coming along in the next 15 or 20 minutes. So if I were you, I would set myself a goal of meeting 2 people you hadn't met before and see how that goes, okay? I hope you'll stay for a minute, and I hope you'll join us in applauding the students one more time.